Hello, and welcome to the Logistics Management Podcast. My name's Jeff Berman. I'm Group News Editor for Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group. Today, it's a real pleasure to welcome Cassandra Gaines to our podcast. She serves as founder and CEO of Jacksonville, Florida-based Carrier Assure, a transportation risk management platform she built to help to help brokers and shippers identify carriers that may meet modern industry vetting standards using safety, fraud, and operational data. She's also a nationally recognized transportation attorney and expert witness specializing in broker liability, carrier vetting, and transportation risk management. Cassandra also advises brokers, shippers, insurers, and law firms on negligent selection exposure, FMCSA safety data, cargo theft prevention, and defensible carrier selection practices. She previously held legal and leadership roles at large brokerages and trucking companies and has become a leading voice on transportation safety analytics and brokerage standard of care issues. Cassandra has spoken at more than 100 industry conferences nationwide and was named one of Business Insider's 100 People Transforming Business in North America. Cassandra, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great to have you on, especially in light of what's been going on in truckload circles, trucking
It's
circles,
been
that is.
wild.
Yeah, to say the least. So, why don't we start with the recent Supreme Court ruling on negligent broker liability regarding whether freight brokers can be sued under state negligence law for hiring unsafe trucking companies. This has obviously been again, a huge story in freight transportation circles. So let's start at the top. How do you sort of view this ruling from the perspective of various industry stakeholders? So, carriers, shippers, brokers, etc.
It's a good question. And I want to mention something, Jeff, that I think it's so cool that the Supreme Court has ruled on something in our industry, and it tends
Right.
to feel like our industry gets ignored and brushed under. And here we are, we have this big Supreme Court case, and all eyes are on all the players. And
Absolutely.
it has an impact for sure. And so for those of you who don't know, Montgomery is the Supreme Court case, as we constantly say, Montgomery lately.
Yeah.
And that's a individual who was injured in a lawsuit and sued the motor carrier that caused the accident, and then also a big brokerage in our industry called C.H. Robinson, as you guys all know.
Yep.
And what C.H. Robinson had said, and the premise of this case is, hey, I'm going to dumb this down, way down, Jeff. Like, there's
Yeah.
plenty of lawyers who are going to give you tons of really good stuff, but I'm going to say it for the lay people. So,
Yeah.
really basic, high level. C.H. Robinson was like, hey, you can't sue me for hiring this trucking company that caused the accident because of
Hmm.
this old federal law that's going to protect C.H. Robinson from being sued. And the background of that is so many jurisdictions, so many different courts throughout our country were saying, having different rulings on this. Some were saying, no, we don't think the old federal law should apply here. Brokers should be able to be sued for a carrier's conduct. And then
Hmm.
some other jurisdictions were like, no, we disagree. And so this disagreement was brewing in our industry. And then that's when the Supreme Court stepped in and said, we're going to rule on this. And they
Yeah.
stepped in and said unanimously, no, sorry, C.H. Robinson, you can be sued for this. This old federal law does not apply. So that's super
Right.
high level. And then you saw a panic in our industry just unfold. I didn't see that coming. I
Hmm.
figured for the majority of brokers who this directly impacts, they are going to, and it's like your question was a great one. How does this ruling impact all these different segments of our industry? For brokers, they're panicking. I don't know quite why. And the majority of them will reach out to me. I have to calm them down because
Yeah.
the majority of brokers they're already doing a great job selecting carriers. They care about their
Hmm.
business. They care about the shippers. They care about safety. They're selecting carriers how they should. And so when they hear the Supreme Court saying, yes, you can be sued for something a trucking company does on the road, they panic. They're like, oh my God, but well, you're doing a good job. You don't really need to worry. The brokers who were um, relying on this old federal law to protect them so they didn't have to dig into the carrier's background as much,
Hmm.
because they didn't feel like they had to worry about it. That's a segment. It's a small segment of brokers that feel like they're going to have to re look at their processes and decide, all right, what data points do we want to look at? How do we want to look at these carriers differently, knowing that if they get in an accident, we could be sued for it. So that's how brokers were impacted, which is the
Yes.
biggest direct impact. But the triple effect, like I like your question because it was like a trickle down.
Yeah,
So
sure.
carriers are seriously going to be impacted because those
Hmm.
carriers who have safety data that puts them in a position where perhaps they have not been driving as carefully or paying attention to federal regulations or been getting in more violations that they should have. Those carriers who have less than desirable DOT statistics are going to see and feel the hurt because they're not going to get much business from shippers and brokers.
No, 100%. Well said. And I think you kind of answered this to a degree already, Cassandra. But in terms of lessons learned from the ruling and future impacts on the trucking sector, now, admittedly, this ruling was only the week before last, so it's still very fresh. But
Hmm.
what are some let's look at it from a potential perspective in terms of what sort of the what now or what comes next aspect. And I just say that because there obviously, as you had indicated, there was a ton of feedback and reception to the ruling. And as you had indicated at the outset, the Supreme Court and trucking usually don't necessarily mix. It doesn't always come up much, or in freight transportation logistics in general, outside of tariffs, it seems like. So this was different in that sense. But what are some of the lessons? Let's stick with the lessons learned aspect, for example. What are things that they need to know going forward in light of the ruling?
The biggest lesson learned is going to be, especially for brokers, and soon for shippers as well, I believe, because there's going to be more incidental impacts. But you can't ignore safety data. You can't ignore data that's right there, publicly available. C.H. Robinson has continuously promoted that we're not looking at that DOT safety data that's readily available on public sites and third party applications. We're just going to check the authority and the insurance. And that was what they were promoting, and they still are promoting. And I don't think that that is going to be the industry standard. I know it's not going to be the industry standard because I'm an expert witness. I testify
Right.
in court on what's the industry standard. The majority of brokers, they do look at that data and they need to know, hey, I'm doing the right thing by looking at that data. I need to just set my policies, document that I've done a good job. And that's the lesson learned. We just don't ignore glaring information, and we document and have reasonable policies.
Yeah, I mean, being focused, checking all your boxes, and making sure you're doing things the right way can go a long way, right?
Yeah, it really
Y-
can. And
Yeah,
I guess I didn't realize you had said, there was an impact on the industry when this case had come out. And I didn't quite realize the extent that this case would have on our industry. I'm now hearing insurance companies, insurance brokers coming back to me and saying that there's huge increases in their premiums. Um, and I'm hearing, smaller carriers, of course, the ones that are doing a great job are getting more business. And the ones who've been not following the regs and doing such a great job, they're losing business.
right.
And then we've got brokers who are saying perhaps maybe they can't even afford their insurance for the next upcoming year.
Oh man.
So, right, I didn't see all that coming. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a big consolidation in our industry. We're going to see
Well, I,
movement
I was
where.
I was just going to bring that up because
Hmm.
even prior to this ruling, we have seen a decent amount of I can't necessarily quantify it, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, but capacity obviously is tightened up given
Hmm.
various actions by the government, federal government, in regards to CDLs, non-domicile CDLs, English language proficiency, uh, things along those lines. All in the name of safety um, at a time, and obviously this isn't a pricing talk, but it seems like it's been beneficial for carriers to a large degree as we see. as we see them get some pricing power, which has long been missing on the carrier side for
Yes, it
for
has.
a few years. Maybe we can hit on that maybe a little bit more when we get through the Montgomery talk, but we have more to go on that subject. Um, recently, after the Montgomery ruling, an industry group, the National Industrial Transportation League, they said that this ruling will significantly alter liability exposure across the transportation sector. What's your take on that?
I really didn't. I think maybe I was a little naive, but I didn't think it would be so significant. But now, talking to some of the plaintiff attorneys and defense attorneys, I didn't realize how many of those attorneys with pending cases were going to rely on this federal law and how big the federal law was reaching as a defense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think the doors are opening and cases are being relitigated. We just saw a case against Echo for negligent selection of a motor
Hmm.
carrier now going to be reopened. So it does have a wider effect than I ever anticipated it would.
No doubt. No doubt. And then that lends nicely to in terms of how, and this is probably more of a sweet spot for carrier sure too. Just in terms of sort of how this ruling impacts carrier selection processes going forward. How do you view that?
Yep. I think that is going to be huge. And I hear from so many of our customers now asking first. I think the biggest question is most people are like, we don't understand what would be industry standard. And I'm trying my hardest, Jeff, to put out a lot of content on that, at least of what I testify and what my
Yeah.
knowledge of years in the industry is. And I'm writing a book right now on it.
Oh, great.
But I think that frustrates a lot of people. And so they're looking at their own internal policies and saying, okay, how can we hone this? And so that it's a little tighter if we get sued, we feel more comfortable defending it. And I think there were a lot of brokers who did not have policies, by the way. And so they're putting some in place now. And now what's happening is they're looking at, oh no, all these carriers we can't hire. And that we originally were hiring. So they're looking into that and then exactly what data points are available. So
Sure.
it's been very busy. I didn't
N-
I didn't see that coming at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
Understood.
and the thing is most of the brokers I talk to, they're already doing a great job. And I have to calm them down. I'm like, you guys, don't worry. You've been doing a great job. You're very passionate about it and you don't need to worry about this.
Right, right, yeah. Um, and then and we had touched. I had touched. I guess I got ahead of my skis there. I had mentioned the capacity, how some capacity had been exiting the industry already prior to
Mhm.
this. I don't want to. I would never want to say, oh, well, this is going to really strip down the number of trucks on the road by X. But things were already pretty tight, as we had just mentioned, and you're seeing
Mhm.
rate gains there. Um, how do you, based on conversations that you've had, whether with brokers, carriers, shippers, whomever, what are they say? What are they telling you about sort of the capacity landscape at the moment, and over the last couple of weeks, since the ruling was handed down?
You're spot on. You got your thumb right on the pulse, because they're saying the same conversations and same points about capacity. They were coming into the year with less trucks available on the road
Yeah,
because of all the political involvement with the CDLs and et cetera, like you said. But then now we've got a situation where they're hesitating to hire a certain segment of carriers, which is a pretty large segment of carriers that have very significant safety issues that they need to be addressed. Like it's bigger than most people would think. So
no,
I think
yeah,
that we are going to see at least extremely short term capacity issues. And then I imagine those carriers with issues are going to shut down and just consolidate and become owner operators for carriers who don't have
yeah,
those types of issues. I could see that coming. I bet you were thinking the same thing.
yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm. And
So
then, oh, by the way, I saw this video on TikTok of this truck driver, and I don't know if it's true. I never know with TikTok if people are just making stuff up and they're
right,
recording themselves because they could.
yeah,
There's no credibility check. And this driver is saying, "Hey, I'm at a truck stop, and this guy over here says no brokers will hire him. This guy over here says no brokers will hire him because of the Supreme Court case." And da da,
Wow.
and it was, yeah, and I didn't know if that's true or not, but it was enough where, this random truck driver is going to put a video on TikTok about it.
Okay. Interesting.
Right.
Interesting. I thought it'd be good just to touch upon, and just for those listening in, they may not be familiar with some of the jargon or
Yeah.
terminology. The FMCSA, and for those in the audience that aren't familiar, that's the Department of Transportation's Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Um, they obviously have been awful busy, especially of late. But I thought it'd be interesting if you could just sort of provide your take on where the FMCSA sits on all this. When we talk about things like their basic scores, back in the old days, not that long ago, but we all used to talk about CSA.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do you sort of view the state of their standards, their qualifications, whatever you want to call it, in terms of how they rule who's safe, who's not, who's able to move freight over the road, etc. I know
Yeah.
I'm leaving that fairly open-ended, just because it's fairly top level. I mean, if you just want to talk about basic, for example, that's totally fine.
No, I'm going to actually go high level just like you did because I'm going to take a different twist to what
Sure.
most people in the industry have been hearing about a lot since the Supreme Court case was pending. And they would say all this depends on the FMCSA. They're the people who should be saying whether carrier is safe or not. Da 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 da. They took down the CSA scores that they used to have. They did that in
Hmm.
2015. They have all these disclaimers. You're going to hear all these things. But what I do is I take a practical approach because that's my job. My
Yeah.
job's supposed to take all this legal stuff and give people actual something practical to hold on to, which is practicality. Is it doesn't matter what the FMCSA has their little disclaimers and what they've done and da da da. What matters is what data is available to the general public, and that's the data the plaintiff attorney is going to look at before they decide to sue a broker or a shipper.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. So if the FMCSA is publishing data, which they are, about carriers with their violations, they're publishing data about carriers with like the measures at least of which is a portion of the CSA score. So they're really giving you like a big piece of the CSA scores
Yeah.
available. And they're giving you lots of data. They're giving third party applications data. So now third party applications like Carrier Assure and others are becoming mainstream. That's what's important is what is out there right now. So I tell people, don't be so hung up on the FMCSA. Yeah, it's their job, blah, blah, whatever you want to argue. But when you get back to your desk and you're deciding what your policy should be for how you're picking a safe, well, I shouldn't say safe. Let's not say safe. You never know if they're safe. A reasonable selection of carriers.
Yeah.
You look at what data is available, and the FMCSA is giving the public a lot of that data. And until they take all that data away, that data we have to use, and that we have to look at and utilize it when we're about to hire a trucking company.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's good. It's good to have, and it helps you make better, educated, more informed decisions, to be sure.
It does, and the reason why that data is readily public, and the FMCSA has even updated how they've given that data to the public numerous times in the last 2 years.
Oh,
Until they completely pull it down, that data needs to be utilized.
no, absolutely. So we're getting near the end here, Cassandra, and I was interested though, and it wasn't in the outline, but you a few minutes ago had talked about the insurance element of this and how
Yeah.
in some cases, there could be some pretty steep jumps, coming at a time, when you look at all, if you ever look at that data from ATRI, for example, the American Transportation Research Institute, under the purview of the American Trucking Associations, they always do a really great job at kind of unpacking or peeling the onion, if you will, on the cost, what it really costs to run a truck, even a small fleet, a one truck, five truck, 10 trucks, whatever. And insurance is really high up on that list.
Hmm. Yep.
So, man, in light of recent events, insurance is going to continue in probably some cases, to be a real tall bar for some carriers to deal with. How do you sort of view the insurance element of all this? Not necessarily just related to the Montgomery ruling, but other, just in order to maintain carrier operations.
Hmm.
I'd just be interested to get your take on that.
I think that for a long time, and you know this, we were all talking about in the industry how there's too many brokers and too many carriers, and what is interesting that's happened over time is insurance has become almost a barrier to entry. We've
Sure.
kind of managed that a little bit in our industry, but it also makes me sad because we've got great trucking companies out there and great small brokerages, family-owned brokerages that might not be able to continue to do business because of insurance
Yeah.
prices. Um, and I got completely distracted thinking about these small companies and totally missed out on your question. What was your question? Because I know it was a
Oh,
good one.
no, no,
I'm
it
so
just
sorry. I started
no,
thinking about
no,
how
it's totally
sad this was and then got down this road.
totally fine. It's not. I've done that too. No, just like insurance ramifications. I guess I'll just two-part it, if you will. One, insurance ramifications from Montgomery, and just two, it challenges that insurance presents for carriers, especially the
Mhm.
small ones, at a time when trucking has, even with rates going
Yeah.
up, margins still can be small and it's very expensive to run a trucking business.
Yep. And then, by the way, Jeff, to pile on top of that before I answer your question, we've been dealing with years of this insane cargo theft. Like insane.
Yes,
Everyone's been
yes,
hit by it. Everybody's been hit by it. And then on top of that, more fraud with carriers transporting loads and then not getting paid by it because they were actually hired by a scammer. This
yeah,
industry's been a mess. And then to
yeah,
pile this on top of it, I don't want to make people all depressed, but it's it's a huge impact, and
yeah,
I'm hoping that sooner or later it'll settle out, but it doesn't look good. The outlook doesn't look good
right. It's an
for
interesting
insurance
time.
premiums, and it is.
Yeah,
And for those companies that have been very careful how they run their business and have been investing heavily into, especially carriers investing heavily into driver training, and not cycling through owner operators as fast and being careful with onboarding and oversight, it is going to pay off for them. Their
yeah,
insurance rates aren't going to be as high for them, and brokers and shippers are going to want to hire them more. So bravo to them. It must be a very exciting time for them.
yeah,
And
I'm
you can
sure.
see in carrier, sure, they're literally like we label carriers A through F.
Wow.
Literally, and
Okay.
yeah, and so you can know if a carrier doesn't meet the industry standard for a full truckload interstate shipment, it'll literally say a D or an F, and it'll give you like you can still hire them, but you've just got to do additional due diligence. But then we've got carriers labeled as A pluses, BB pluses. Those carriers are probably loving life right now. Like they're
Yeah.
feeling
Yes.
great.
Especially now.
Yes, but I didn't realize, that so much of our insurance underwriters had written the policies based on that federal law being enforceable. I didn't
Hmm.
realize that piece. So when I talked to some underwriters last week, and they said, wow, we've got to backtrack. Like we gave quotes to brokers and to carriers about what their insurance is going to be for the following year, their premiums, and they've
Hmm.
taken those quotes back and been like, hey, we're reassessing.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, just in wrapping up here, we've obviously talked a ton about the Montgomery Supreme Court ruling. Um, What are some of the other things, that you're sort of keeping a close eye on as it relates to sort of the carrier assure sweet spot or business model, if you will, with carrier vetting? But also, what are some other things that you're watching as it relates, aside from the carrier vetting that your company does, in terms of trucking and the supply chain in general? Like what's got your attention,
Good
basically?
question.
Yeah, what has your attention?
Obviously, helping people understand what the industry standard is has the majority of my attention. But there's something else interesting creeping up, Jeff,
Yeah.
which is shipper liability. So I think that that's going to be a significant area of growth with litigation. I think that more and more plaintiff attorneys, they already have been looking to shippers for liability, but they're going to do it even more in two different areas. One is the shipper knew that the broker um, did not have reasonable carrier vetting policies and or didn't even ask or investigate into their policies. I think that there's going to be some interesting areas of liability that will form around that.
Okay.
So, and then the other piece is going to be the shippers knew that the truck driver couldn't speak English when the truck driver arrived at the
Ah,
facility. Yeah,
okay.
right. Or the truck had very visible maintenance problems or was inadequate for the shipment, et cetera. I think a lot of those types of things are going to build, and shippers are going to find themselves brought into litigation more and more. And they can't just rely on, oh, the broker hired me or the carrier hired, sorry, I hired the broker, I hired the carrier. They have to indemnify and defend me, which means they have to pay my bill, my legal bill.
Hmm.
I mean, with the way insurance is going lately, I wouldn't bank on that being a first line of defense if I was a shipper sitting in on internal meetings assessing
Yeah.
liability.
No, no doubt about it. It's really interesting. So, look, this brings us to the end of our allotted time for today's podcast, Cassandra. So, on behalf of Logistics Management and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, I just want to say thanks for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me. And I loved your questions. I love you're very
Absolutely.
in tune with our industry.
Yeah, I like to hear that. Thank you. I'll have to pass that along to my editor and publisher. For those of you listening in, you want to reach out to Cassandra and maybe learn a little bit more about Carrier Assure. Her address is simply Cassandra at carrierassure.com. And the company's website is also just simply carrierassure.com. And if you want to link up with her on LinkedIn, it's simply linkedin.com/IN/Mad Gaines. And that's MADGAINES. And for those of you on Twitter, please feel free to go ahead and give Logistics Management a follow. It's really easy at Logistics MGMT. And also, if you're not subscribed to our podcast, I encourage you to please do so. All you got to do is enter the Logistics Management Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and it'll pop right up. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.